In this video, we will talk about Intrusion Prevention Service, IPS for short. And to make it more interesting, I've set a FTP server that is known to have a security vulnerability, so I will gain complete control of that FTP server. Then we will turn on IPS and see the effect it has, and then we will simply go through the configuration of IPS on the SonicWall firewall. Hi, I'm Jean-Pierre Talbot, SE for SonicWall in Canada, helping customer and reseller get the most out of their network security solution. If you're new here, please make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss on upcoming videos. Also, all the link to the content I'll mention will be in the description box down below. So let's get started. At the very high level, IPS is designed to block bad stuff. If everybody knows about antivirus, right? Antivirus is looking for bad stuff as well, but on files, right? If you transfer a file between two machines or on a USB stick, antivirus will inspect each of those files, trying to find something bad on them. If we bring this to our real life, that could be antivirus looking at a cup of coffee that is being shared by two persons, and antivirus will be like, hey, there's the flu right there. Don't transfer this. Stop that, right? Or more recently, if you cough in front of someone, antivirus would look at droplets and find COVID-19 and drop the droplets. So IPS is kind of like an antivirus, but it doesn't look at files. It just looks at communication, packet being exchanged. So if we bring this again to our real life, that could be two persons in two different rooms, maybe between the glass. So both rooms are airtight, but they can see each other and that both person can talk, or just two person talking over the phone. So IPS would look at words that are being exchanged, and if something is known to get the other person sad or unhappy or upset, then IPS would block those sentences going through the phone, for instance. So IPS will look at IP communication between two systems to try to identify something that is known to gain more privilege or get a system to behave in a way it's not designed to be. For instance, a few months ago, January 2020, Microsoft had a security flaw on remote desktop, and they released a built-in about it. And it says that this vulnerability is pre-authentication and requires no user interaction. An attacker who successfully exploits this vulnerability could execute arbitrary code on the target system. An attacker could then install program, view, change, or delete data, or create new accounts with full user right. So best, of course, in those situations is to update your Windows server. But also companies like SonicWall are releasing IPS signatures that get added to their firewall. So what happens is if the firewall see that specially crafted packet, it will simply drop it and prevent the packet to ever hit that server. So let's see this in action. Here I have a very old FTP server running on Windows XP. That FTP server has a security exploit. If you send it a very long username, it simply crashes and allows me to inject code, so then I will gain complete control of that server. So we will first do it with every single services off on the firewall, so it is expected to work because I'm saying the firewall do not inspect anything, just let that traffic go. Then we will turn IPS on and we'll see the effect it has on the firewall and on that server as well. Quick note here, I'm gonna run this attack on my own lab, my own device in my network. Do not attempt to do this on systems you do not own, like sending those attacks over the internet. That is simply not legal. So this is the hacking machine. It is Kali Linux. It's a pre-made ISO file that you can install as a virtual machine I have here, or boot on a laptop. And it has all hacking tools already pre-installed. So it's a great tool to do demo and testing. Here I'm loading Metasploit, which is a big database of different exploits that exist. So one of the best tools to be a script kiddie and show off that you know things, but at the end all you can do is follow a YouTube video you saw online. So here I'm loading the exploit I want to use, which is on a software called WarFTP version 1.65. So I'm simply saying load this exploit. Here I'm going to do show target to select what target machine it is, and in my case the FTP server I host in my lab, I know it is Windows XP Service Pack 3. Next, I can do show options to see what are the things that I need to provide for the exploit to work. And obviously, the most common one is to set the remote host that I want to attack. So I put the IP address of my FTP server. Next is to show payload. There is roughly 150 different payload that I can inject to do whatever I want. And here I'm just going to do a basic one, which is to have a remote command prompt of that target machine. But as you can see, there is some on VNC as well. So I could inject a VNC and take control over VNC of that server. And now I'm typing exploit to just get the thing to do all the work for me. And type in CMD, and here we go. I do have remote control in command line of that Windows XP machine. I can also run executables on that machine, and here, because I'm a nice guy, I'm just starting the calculator, so calc.exe, so it starts the calculator on that remote machine, but I could have run any executable file I would have liked. And I can also create folders and, everything you can do in command line, right? Next, moving on that FTP server, as you can see, the calculator is open, and also the UI of that piece of FTP software looks all messed up because it's crashed. As soon as I clicked on it, it just died. And I do have my potato folder here as well. And now let's try again. I did restart that FTP server to bring it back online, and let's run the exploit command again. And we see that it is simply not working. So next, let's connect in the firewall and go see what we have into the logs. If we search for IPS, we do see an entry for IPS that catched a malform FTP user command. And we do have plenty of details here. And let's try to connect to that FTP server using a standard FTP client. And as you can see, that FTP server is safe and sound and everything is working. Now that I covered what is IPS and why you need it and demo it in action, now let's look at the configuration of IPS in the firewall and dig into every single button we have in there. So go into Policies, Security Services, Intrusion Prevention. See the note on the top saying you need to turn on IPS per zone. So you can either click that link or go into the object menu and into zones. I would personally suggest to turn on IPS on all the internal zones that you are using. So find those zones, click the edit button and turn on IPS. Now go back into policies, turn on IPS globally. See here we have the prevention column, meaning that an IPS signature will be dropped. And here the detection, it means that it will be allowed, but it will be logged. And on the left, you do have the high priority, medium, and low. I would personally suggest to turn on prevention and detection on high and medium. Next, you have exclusion. You can do exclusion with address range or with address object. Next, you can go into signatures. On the top left, you do have a search, which we will use later on. You can search any term or most likely the signature ID. We do have filter on priority, category, and we can also filter the view on signature and category. And we will look at the low priority and see we do have a fair amount of ping that are part of the IPS low priority, and we'll use them to demo logging and doing exceptions. So here we'll turn on prevention and detection on the low priority, and we'll do some ping to find out about IPS being triggered and how to find them in the logs, and also do an exceptions on it. So we'll just try and ping 8.8.8.8. As you can see, it doesn't work. So we'll go into monitoring, into live logs, and I will type in IPS. And as we can see, we do have a IPS that triggered. We see it's a echo reply. So it's the traffic coming back. So it's coming back from 8.8.8 to me. And we do have the signature ID 316. So now we'll go back into the IPS settings, into signature, and we'll type in 316 in the search field. And we have everything that has 316 in it, and the first one is the signature ID 316. As you can see, we do have a fair amount of options. Generally speaking, I would suggest you investigate a IPS signature that triggered. I would generally not recommend you do a complete exception for that signature, but do an exception for that specific traffic, like do an exception for the target machine where that IPS signature trigger. But in that case, it's just ping, so I personally believe it's not much of a big risk to disable that signature completely. And now let's try again. And as you can see, my ping is working. We'll go have a look in the logs and see I still do have a IPS that triggered, but see the difference? The one at the bottom is prevention and the one at the top is detection. It means that we've detected it, but we let it go because of course we've set an exception to disable this IPS signature. One important point, since the beginning I demo and I talk about IPS for inbound traffic, like protecting a server you are hosting. It's important to know that IPS is also designed to work outbound, so it can protect your employees when they go out on the web browsing any web server they want, and make sure that those web servers are not designed to try and leverage a security vulnerability on the browser. So IPS can also protect your employee when they go out and browse the web. Thanks for watching. I hope you liked that video. If that's the case, let me know. Send me a quick email, give it a thumbs up, subscribe on YouTube, and see you in the next one.